For the past 6 years, I've been bringing you to some of the most historic, creepy, and abandoned places in Southwest Virginia and Southwest Virginia. Now, I don't really do ghosts and supernatural stuff. I prefer to stick to history. But me and ghost hunters were kind of like sheetrockers and electricians. We might have very different jobs, but we do them in the same place. Needless to say, every once in a while, I've had a spooky experience. I'm making this video due to popular demand, and it's going to be the top 5 times that I wasn't ghost hunting, but they were hunting me. And all that stuff happened while I was making videos for y'all, but I'm going to throw in a couple personal stories too, like the World War II era German POW camp that I grew up on, and the one time I was in Wythe County and I had to try to fist fight a ghost. And it might sound stupid, but when you hear my story, you're going to understand I had no other options. For people who want to experience some creepiness, but they're not quite as gung-ho as me, I'm also going to give y'all a list of local haunted places for y'all to check out, and a list of local cemeteries that are supposed to be haunted.
Number 5. The Abandoned Hospital. This was the county hospital from 1924 to 1973. Before this, the only hospital in the county was a private one owned by a chemical company. In 1959, an addition was built, and the 2 buildings were connected with this bridge. They stopped operating as a hospital in 1973 because that's when the new one opened. Then this place was used as a nursing home and a doctor's office. There was also a training program for nurses here. In 2005, the nursing home was losing money, with only 5 of the 39 patients being paid for by cash or insurance. The rest were getting paid by Medicaid, and the Randolph House was losing $500 a month per patient, and that caused the nursing home to close in 2005. The properties passed through multiple hands, but because of the lead paint and asbestos that it's built with, they can't really do nothing with it because of the cost, and it's just sat here and become derelict. This place has gotten a reputation for being haunted, and it's not uncommon for teenagers or ghost hunters to sneak on in here. When I moved to Virginia in 2009, I actually lived in the same county as this hospital. You know the Fairlawn Walmart? I live the Camelot Apartments right behind it. If you've ever been there, you know that place is about the definition of hood in the woods. I've known about this place a long time before I started filming and taking pictures, and I gotta tell you, this is one of my favorite explorers. But also, this is one of my first Facebook posts to go viral too. And reading all the comments from people in the posts, I really kind of started appreciating how beloved this hospital is by the community. Everyone has a personal relationship to it, whether they was born here, or their grandparents were here, or they did their nurse training here. And as you go through this video, I just want you to notice there's absolutely no graffiti. Nothing's been destroyed in here. You've got decay, you've got the building falling apart from not being used, but you don't have anyone maliciously coming in here and tearing it apart. I'm not trying to down the town that the hospital's in, but it can get a little bit rough there sometimes. And there's plenty of other old buildings I've been in there that have been completely destroyed by people. But I don't think I've ever been in another old building that has had so little destruction from people, especially one that's as popular as this one and well known that so many people just go in it. And it has a reputation for being haunted. A lot of people have come here, from industrial accidents, car accidents, and like I said, it's a rough town. People have come here for rough reasons too. And I'm going to say that this is about the standard of haunting that old buildings like this would have. That's why I have it at the bottom of my list. All I really experienced here was hearing doors shut and then footsteps without seeing anybody. But to be fair, old building with like half its windows missing, can get a little breezy. Doors get blown shut, and that'd be kind of bold for me to think I was the only person in there. So there might have just been someone else in there walking around or doing whatever they do, and that's who I heard. But I'd never seen anything to prove or disprove anything. I can't even say that I really ever got a bad feeling in the building, besides, the normal anxiety of running into a pack of crackheads or getting caught up for trespassing. But I didn't feel like a dread or someone watching me or anything like that at all. It really was just kind of like a warm, happy place, for real.
Shoo-wee, that was spooky. Footsteps and slamming doors. Quick, someone call Zach Baggins. Next up, another place Zach Baggins might want to check out. My haunted hometown.
I was born on Lakenheath Air Force Base in England, and over the next 17 years, I bounced around 4 different military installations in Europe. From 1993 until 2000, I lived at Bad Aibling Station, and it looked just like this, even though I can tell from the chorus this picture was taken before I was born. In this picture, those are the Alps in the background. That's the first mountain range I've lived in. The Appalachians is my third. Anyway, so I've lived on Air Force bases, and I lived on infantry bases, and they are both very loud. Bad Aibling was different. It was very quiet, because it was a listening base. These were called the golf balls, and it's what our base was known for. Inside of them was some high-tech spy equipment. My base was run by my favorite oxymoron, military intelligence. The base was originally established in 1936. The Germans built a small airstrip there, but later it was used as a POW camp to house the armies of the other countries they had conquered around Europe. Hogan Heroes might have made all this look fun, but in my entire life, I've never heard anyone say, "Hey, do you know where I miss being? That German POW camp." So I'm pretty sure this was not a place you wanted to be. The great General Patton wasn't the kind of guy to throw away a perfectly good POW camp. So after the U.S. liberated my base, we turned it around and we started using it to house German POWs. After World War II, in retribution for some of the things that the Germans had done, General Patton decided not to feed POWs, and that caused a large loss of life. So after my hometown had about 15 years of war crimes happen in it, it was repurposed for another equally depressing but necessary thing. Bad Aibling became the only base in the Allied sector to specialize in housing children who had been displaced by the war. Their cities had been leveled and their families deceased. They had to go somewhere. Everything on this base was either built during World War II or immediately after it. This is our school right here. It used to be an old hospital. Look at our beautiful apartments that we lived in. They had 3 stairwells a building with 6 apartments per stairwell. That means 18 families lived in one building. There were some abandoned buildings on the base. One of them, me and my friends all used to hang out in like it was our clubhouse. But there was another one that we didn't mess with, and it was the one right here on the right. Legend is, back when the base was a POW camp, this building was used to house Russian POWs. After the war was over, and everybody was getting repatriated to their country of origin, Stalin, the leader of Russia, said, anyone who had been taken prisoner of war wasn't fighting hard enough, and they would be punished when they returned home. In fact, he unalived his son for being taken POW. Now, I'm not sure what we can say is worse, being in a German POW camp or getting punished by Stalin. But either way, the Russians decided to tap out. So to the left is the barracks, and to the right's the field that this happened. One night, they left the barracks, went into the field behind it, and they had a mass unaliving of themselves. I've never been able to find any confirmation that this story is true, but I did find out that things like this happened with such frequency that the Allies stopped sending Russian POWs back to Russia. So for 7 years, every day I walked to school, if I walked on the street, I would walk past the front of this building, but I could take a shortcut through the field that all this allegedly happened in. And in my whole time there, I never saw anything, I never heard anything, and I never had anyone have any first-hand stories of something that had happened to them. I only heard the legend of this building.
Keeping the World War II vibe going, let me tell you about this asylum. Now, it was run by a mad scientist, and he also shared a lot of this German ideology and helped spread it around America.
Number 4. The Old Asylum. To add to the spookiness of this place, all the windows are boarded up, so it's always pitch black. This place was founded in 1932 by the superintendent of the state hospital, which is in the same town. Instead of being state funded, this was for more wealthy clients and was privately funded. This wasn't the first institution that the superintendent had helped create. 20 years earlier, he was involved in the creation of the Colony for the Epileptic and Feeble-Minded. The colony was started as a lower security alternative to the state hospital for patients that wouldn't have needed such high security because they weren't violent or unpredictable. A good example of people who were sent to the colony would be Emma Buck and her daughter, Carrie Buck. They had both been sent there for being promiscuous and feeble-minded. So Mr. Superintendent and some of his political buddies, they got a law passed, and they took Emma's daughter, Carrie, all the way to the Supreme Court to argue that they should be able to sterilize her or not allow her to reproduce anymore for the good of society because clearly they have a bad bloodline. The case is called Buck v. Bell, and the famous quote from Justice Holmes is 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. So Carrie got sterilized, and then that ruling was used to sterilize a whole lot more people. The sterilization laws have been overturned, but the precedent of Buck v. Bell still stands, and is still used today, mainly when the government wants to make you do something that you don't want to do. How scary is that? While the superintendent was on the trip of creating the perfect race of humans, he found someone else who had a similar ideology, mainly the leader of 1930s Germany. They were pen pals, and they'd write each other letters, including poetry. The ruling of Buck v. Bell had been used by the German legislature to pass a very similar set of laws, and they were using them. 2 years after this place opened, Mr. Superintendent went to see the Virginia legislature. There, he pleaded with them to broaden the scope of the sterilization program. The Germans are beating us at our own game, he told them. Those World War II era Germans, they liked their sterilization program so much that they upgraded it, and they made a forced euthanasia program. Euthanasia is like a medically prescribed unaliving, so anyone who would be born that would qualify for sterilization, they would get euthanized. Also, you might not see Granny and Grandpa after you put them in the old folks' home. So that was like the 1930s, and we all know what happened with Germany in the 1940s, with the camps. So it's kind of like part of the root of that ideology was born right here. So when the war was over and everything was figured out, anything related to that ideology fell out of popularity in America. But it didn't fall out of popularity with Mr. Superintendent. In 1943, Virginia removed Mr. Superintendent from his position at the state hospital. But this asylum was his, and they couldn't kick him out. And he roamed around here like a mad scientist. He began experimenting with blood transfusions, giving someone with mania the blood from someone with depression to see if it would cure their symptoms. You know how when you go get an x-ray, they put that lead plate over your lap? Right? So Mr. Superintendent also began using x-rays to sterilize people. He was king of the castle here for another 4 years until his retirement in 1947. He died in 1957 and he's buried next to his wife. They had no children. So that whack job ran this place for about 15 years. And besides that whole crazy story, they did normal stuff too, like giving people lobotomies and electroshock therapy and packing 5, 6, 7, 8 people into a room because they didn't have space. Eventually the state takes over this place, and in the 70s, they turned it into a mental hospital for children. That's why it's got all these paintings on the wall. I mean, not with the graffiti, but the other paintings. This place shut down in 1996, and it's been sitting empty ever since. If someone was to believe in ghosts and spirits, with a backstory like this would be the place to find them. And guess what? I wasn't looking, but they found me. I heard the normal stuff, like footsteps and doors closing, but then I had something a little bit spookier happen to me in the stairwell. So there I was, on the 3rd floor rec area, which is going to be the one right underneath the one that's all boarded in. So I'm outside filming this, and my girlfriend, she's sitting right next to the camera, because I am a gentleman, and this is the type of place I take my girlfriends. So when I get done out here, she stays here, and I go inside and into the first stairwell. Now, I'm sitting here in like 100% blackness, with a little battery-powered LED light shining in my face, trying to remember my lines and talking to my video camera. And I keep hearing really faint, distant singing. So, I don't know, I guess singing ain't the scariest thing in the world. I just kind of ignored it and just kept on going, and I filmed my whole bit. And then after that, when I go get my girlfriend, I ask her, I say, hey, were you singing? And she's like, no, why are you asking? And so I told her about what I had heard. And she's like, John, you was waiting in the building. I don't think I could have yelled and you heard me. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And then when I was editing this video, which I'm sorry, I don't have the original content. Every time I stopped talking, you could hear like the static of silence getting louder and louder. And then as soon as I start talking again, it would get quiet. And I've never really had anything like that happen editing my videos before. So yeah, that's pretty spooky.
This episode of the Neighborhood Backwoods History and Travel channel was made possible by viewers like you. Please help fund the channel by buying my books or get yourself a t-shirt. Follow me on my socials. You're probably like, wow, Johnny, that's really creepy. Hey, what are you gonna do if one of them spirits tries to get you? Let me tell you about the night I had to fist fight a ghost.
My best friend used to live in Austensville, and that's why I've done so much with county stuff. Anyway, so this is the house on the hill that you see when you come up from the river into Austensville by the school. Alright, and it used to be kind of like in his backyard. So one night, we was all hanging out. It's about midnight. They've got 4 kids in between them, and then there's another kid spending the night at the house too. And his girlfriend gets in the idea that we should all come down to this house in the dark. And so then we started heading down here. My friend had stopped to use the bathroom, but we all started heading through the woods down here. And of course, it's the middle of the night, so we need to switch to night mode. There we go. That's what it looked like. So we huffed through the woods, get down there. I'm trying to be mean, but a couple people in the group had kind of like that PlayStation Mountain Dew lifestyle body type. So it takes us a minute, but we get down here. This is the back door, and you can't see it in this picture, but it's about 3 feet off the ground. It's missing a porch. So everybody's got to, climb up to get inside the house. So inside this door is the kitchen. And back against the kitchen wall is this flight of stairs. So Mom decides to take the kids upstairs. But the kid who's spending the night is like a middle schooler who outweighs me by like 50 pounds. And they tell him, hey, don't come up, just stay down here because we don't want to put all that stress on the stairs. So I stay down there with him. A, I'm not going to leave that kid down here in the dark by himself. That ain't cool. But B, I already know there's a flock of turkey buzzards that live up there, and I am not interested in bothering them. This wall is going to be across from the kitchen sink, and then it's next to the stairs. And I leaned up against it, waiting for them to go up and then come back down with this kid. I hear a noise, and I look in the room and I see that wood flopping around. I'm really confused for a second. And I look at the wall and I see the wall's all solid. You know, there's nothing that me or this kid's doing that's making that wood move. Right about then, everyone's coming down the stairs. And I tell them about the wood in the next room just flopping around on the floor by itself. And so then there's a run of unathletic people trying to get out this small door and down this 3-foot stoop where the porch is missing. And I'm scared too. I want to run away screaming at the top of my lungs, but I'm not allowed to. So I do the only thing I can think of doing. So I stand in front of that door and I just cock my arm back. So here's the room of wood. There's the kitchen. That's the doorway I'm standing in. And right on the other side of this wall is my buddy, who was in the bathroom when we came down the hill. And the noise I heard was him trying to sneak through the room of wood because he had come up through this basement door, which has a back door leading to it. There we are, standing just a few feet from each other in very different moods when Mr. Funny Guy decides to hop out of the doorway and go, "Boo, I gotcha." Meanwhile, I see a dark shadow flash in front of the doorway and throw like a heat-seeking missile haymaker right at it. But I hear that voice, and it sounds familiar, and I realize it's my friend. But too late. The missile's been launched. I can't stop it. The only thing I can do is throw it off course. And right in the nose ends up being, like kind of the ear a little bit, maybe some shoulder or something. He's alright. And I can see it from his point of view too, where, he thinks he's so scary. We're all just gonna be running in fear, and he didn't expect someone to be standing there, throwing hands with him. So I bet that scared him a little bit too. We're still BFFs, and this is just one of the little wacky adventures we've been on. And he don't live in Austensville no more, but shout out to Austensville. I had fun down there with y'all.
We get a little bit silly out there in Wythe County, but you're probably thinking, hey, that's not a real ghost story. Okay, fair enough. Well, let me tell you about the time I did see something in a restaurant that used to be right on top of this hill.
Number 3. The restaurant behind the abandoned hotel. Now, you'd think the abandoned hotel would be the place I would have the spooky encounters, but not quite. On the hill above the hotel was a restaurant, and it worked out great because everyone would come up here to party, and then when they got all tore up, they go crash at the hotel. I'm sorry, but I don't remember the name of the restaurant. I couldn't get very much information off of the sign. And I guess it doesn't really matter because the restaurant's been torn down anyways. This restaurant is the only time I've ever actually seen something. So you see how the floor's all tore up? Those holes are about 4 feet deep. I was standing on the outside of the building, and I could see a doorway, and inside the doorway I could see the ground that's all tore up. And I saw something move, and I'm not sure how to describe it, but it looked like someone had been standing in one of those holes, and all I could really see of them was like their shoulders and their head, and I seen it move. It was almost like it was watching me from the doorway, and I didn't notice it until it left. So I go into the restaurant, and I look around, and I don't see anyone, and the floor's all covered with rubble, and I don't hear any footsteps. So it couldn't have been an animal that big looking at me out of the hole. And it couldn't have been a person because I would have heard them getting away. and to this day I have no explanation of what I saw.
This region has had a long and traumatic history. The French and Indian War, the Revolutionary War, slavery, the Civil War, and industrialization of the railroad and coal industry. In fact, I'm pretty sure we've got more people buried here than living here. With so many people dying young in traumatic ways, it's not hard to believe that we might have a haunted cemetery or two.
Haunted Cemeteries of Southwestern Virginia. Before we begin, I would just like to remind all of y'all that it is illegal to be in a cemetery after dark in Virginia. So if you get caught, don't blame me. This is the Pocahontas Cemetery in Tazewell County, Virginia. This cemetery began its life as a park. In March 1884, there was a large mine explosion in the Pocahontas East Mine, and 114 men and boys were killed. Of those killed, 88 were white, including 26 recent European immigrants. The rest were black, and they had moved from the deep south to the coal fields, seeking a better life and opportunity. It was 19 years after the Civil War, and in what turned out to be a historic event, the men were buried side by side regardless of race. This had never happened before in Virginia history. There was no noble reason for this. Coal camps were segregated. Miners needed houses, and segregating the town didn't mean building any fewer houses, but they were not going to waste land on two separate cemeteries. The Northern Base Company had little tolerance for the South's unresolved racial issues when it came to their profits. Pocahontas is surrounded on three sides by equally coal-rich Mercer County and McDowell County, West Virginia. People from many different cultures and backgrounds flocked here seeking prosperity in the coal fields. Most of the people buried in this cemetery died traumatic deaths at an early age. Tombstones in this cemetery are written in Polish, Russian, Italian, and Hebrew. Today, it is one of the most diverse cemeteries in Virginia. While I didn't have any supernatural experiences filming this, during my research, I found plenty of people that had. This is Sunset Cemetery in Christiansburg. Long before this cemetery was established, it was the site of one of the last legal duels in Virginia. Both men used rifles, and both men died. Virginia Wardlaw and Carolyn Morton are also buried here. They're going to be the two graves without headstones. The reason they don't have headstones is because they've been stolen and vandalized so many times that they are no longer replaced. They came here from Tennessee, where they ran an all-girls college. Their aunt ran a female college here in Christiansburg, and when she got too old to do it anymore, it was handed over to them. There was another sister who was involved with everything they did, but she's not buried here in Christiansburg. It was rumored in Tennessee the three sisters had been practicing witchcraft, and those rumors followed them to Virginia. Of course, it didn't help that the three sisters liked to dress in all black, with veils over their faces. It was rumored they would come to the cemetery after dark, and go over the hill where no one could see them, to practice witchcraft. Their behavior shocked their students to the point that many of them left the school. Eventually, they left Virginia and ended up in New Jersey. There, they were arrested for the death of Carolyn's daughter, O.C. Virginia starved herself to death while awaiting trial, which is very fitting because that's the way they killed O.C. Carolyn was found to be criminally insane, and she died a short time later at an asylum in Trenton. Their family was from Christiansburg, and their bodies were brought back here to be buried, in the same part of the cemetery they used to come to hold their occult rituals. Despite popular opinion, they were not witches, but they were serial killers, who would put life insurance on family members who would soon die mysterious deaths. Osi was the fourth person that they had done this to. One of their children even faked his own death to hide from them. After the sisters left town, the university that they operated was torn down and a public high school built in its place. That building is almost 100 years old now, and everyone who grew up in Christiansburg has a spooky story about when they went to school there. So besides their school, this cemetery is also allegedly haunted by them. On the other side of the cemetery is the grave of Corporal Eric Sutphin. On August 18th, 2005, William Morva and another young man tried to rob a convenience store, but they showed up late and the door was locked. The clerk saw two men outside wearing ski masks and holding guns, so he called the police. Morva was arrested. A year later, he was still awaiting trial when he was taken to the Blacksburg Hospital for a sprained ankle and a sprained wrist. After using the bathroom, Morva assaulted the deputy that was escorting him, knocking him unconscious. Morva then stole his firearm. When a hospital security guard called McFarland came to assist the deputy, Morva shot and killed him. Morva escaped the hospital, and a manhunt was initiated. 3 days later, 13-year veteran of the force, Corporal Sutton, was driving his patrol car down the Huckleberry Trail looking for Morva when Morva found him. He lay in wait and ambushed the corporal as his car passed, ending his life. He was arrested a short time later, hiding in a briar patch about 150 yards from the scene. Morva was convicted, and on July 6, 2017, he became the last person to be executed in the state of Virginia. The reason he's the last one is because on March 24th, 2021, Virginia abolished capital punishment. I am definitely not suggesting that Corporal Sutton haunts this cemetery, but since he died on the job, I like to think that he's keeping an eye on them psychos on the other side of the hill and keeping them in check. This is Paris Cemetery in Parisburg, Virginia. The cemetery is named after George Paris. He was a Revolutionary soldier. After the war, he bought about 200 acres of land along the New River in Giles County. Paris donated about a quarter of his land to the county for them to build a county seat. It was called Giles Courthouse. Paris died in 1810, and he was the first person buried here. To honor him, in 1854, the town of Giles Courthouse changed its name to Parisburg. During the Civil War, 4 Southern soldiers were buried here when they were killed in a skirmish before the Battle of Cloyd's Mountain. In total, 250 people are buried here. Their ages range from a child who was a few months old to a woman that was over 100. The last person to be buried here was in 1910, and after that, the cemetery was forgotten and overgrown. In the early 2000s, the town funded a Boy Scout project to clean up the cemetery. Although the cemetery is right next to US 460, it is only accessible by the Appalachian Trail. The cemetery is reputed to be haunted, so that means if you are up here and something spooky goes down, you got a long way to go to get to your car. Saving the worst for last, this is Coiner Springs Cemetery in Botetourt County. It's a mix between a mass grave and a potter's field. The cemetery was established by the city of Roanoke in 1959, and over 2,000 people are buried here in unmarked graves. Virginia Western Community College sits on the site of the old Roanoke poorhouse. To make room for the college, all 1,200 people who were buried at the poorhouse cemetery were moved here. There was a city-owned cemetery on Orange Avenue, which during segregation times would have been the black side of town. To make way for the 581 Interstate Project, 953 people were dug up from that cemetery and moved here. I have never seen this cemetery come up on lists of haunted places, and I've never found a first-hand account of a ghost story happening here. But with the background behind it, I could definitely understand how there might be a lost soul or two still roaming around.
This is that old school that I was talking about. Now you see these stairs where it says Montgomery Hall right here? This is left over from the college. I guarantee you the sisters walked up these stairs at some point or another. Now I've been inside that old school and it is pretty spooky. But let me tell you about a place that's way scarier than here.
Number 2. St. Albans Sanatorium. It sits on a bluff above the New River across from the city of Radford. During the Civil War, the Northern Army used this hill to shell the city and destroy bridges across the river. In 1892, the Lutheran's Boys' School was opened here. It was founded by George Miles. He was only 30 years old, but he'd already been a professor for 10 years at Emory and Henry College. It was a boarding school for elite children, and the teachers were the cream of the crop. The year the school opened, they played neighboring Virginia Tech in a football game. It would be Virginia Tech's first football game, and they would win, 14-10. The competitive nature of the school encouraged bullying, and several people lost their lives, sometimes by their own hand, and sometimes at the hands of another. George Miles' leadership was essential to the school, and it closed 8 years after his death in 1903. In 1915, the school and its 56 acres were bought by Dr. John King. Dr. King had previously been the superintendent of the Southwestern Lunatic Asylum in Marion, Virginia, and he was appalled by the living conditions and the treatment of the patients there, so he decided to open up his own hospital. At St. Albans, the patients were to be treated with respect and dignity. Not only would they eat fresh food grown on the farm on the grounds, but also work the farm to exercise and socialize. When it first opened, it served Radford as a general hospital. The farm made the patients some of the best fed people in the area during the Great Depression. By 1945, 65,000 patients had come through St. Albans' door, which had only been operated by 48 staff members. Although Dr. King had his patients' best interests in mind, we would consider early treatment for mental illness similar to medieval torture. This is a hydrotherapy tub, where patients would be submerged in ice water for days, or wrapped up in towels dripping wet with ice-cold water, or even sprayed with a fire hose. The idea was the cold water would slow the blood flow to the brain. Another treatment was electroshock therapy, or ECT, and this is the room it was done in. It was first used in 1938. An electric current is run through the patient's body, causing seizures. It is still used today and has been rebranded electroconversion therapy. It is still used because it is the most effective tool to treat mental illness when more traditional methods have failed. Unfortunately for the patients of St. Albans, electroshock therapy was in its infancy, and they were the guinea pigs it was tested on. It was done with no anesthesia. Too much electric current could cause the patient's body to contort violently. Broken bones were not unheard of. The after effects weren't much better. After multiple treatments, patients would have prolonged headaches and severe memory loss. Patients dreaded coming to this room. Mental illness was not the only thing that could bring someone to St. Albans. It also acted as a poorhouse and was home to orphans, retirees, and women who couldn't care for their children. And they were all housed together, and that would create situations where perhaps a mother and her young children would be housed right next to someone with severe mental issues who was violent and unstable. This is the top floor of the western side of the building. It was reserved for older women after their husbands had died. To them, St. Albans was a retirement home. This bathroom is also on the top floor of the western wing, but I can't say its name without angering my corporate sponsors, so we'll call it the unaliving yourself bathroom. The story is, a young lady had a miscarriage, and she was broken-hearted. She took her baby and kept it in a jar, but the nurses found it, and they took it away from her. So she ran into this bathroom and broke the mirror, and using glass from the mirror, she ended it. This bathroom is going to be one of the reasons I'm scared of this place, so just remember it, and we'll be getting back to that in a minute. There's a bowling alley in the basement, and it was built as a place for the doctors to socialize after work, as well as a reward for the patients. It's said that there's another ghost that haunts the boiler room next to the bowling alley. He's called Smokey, and people pay tribute to him by leaving him cigarettes. He's also known for being a little handsy with the ladies. St. Albans continued to grow. In 1960, it was officially recognized as a hospital. They expanded into other communities in Virginia and West Virginia. In the 1980s, there was a large renovation to update the building. By the late 1980s, it was Virginia's only non-profit, full-service psychiatric hospital. Eventually, St. Albans merged with Carillion Health Systems, and all treatments were relocated to a wing at the new hospital. The land that St. Albans sits on was gifted to Radford University in 2004, and they plan to tear it down. In 2007, the demolition was stopped as the process of adding St. Albans to the Historic Registry began. Today, St. Albans is privately owned. It's open for history tours, ghost tours, and a haunted house in the fall. Lots of volunteers give their time to make the tours and haunted house possible, and all proceeds go to paying taxes on the building and maintaining it. It's so haunted, they even have a sign up saying that management accepts no liability for what the ghosts do to you. It's been on countless ghost shows, on TV and YouTube. For everyone who don't know the lay of the land, I got a map for you. So right up top, that's where I used to live, in that real nice apartment complex behind Walmart. And about 4 minutes away from me, there's St. Albans. So I got to go in there before it was a tourist attraction and after it was a tourist attraction. I've never seen anything or heard anything here, but this is the only old building I've ever been to that just knots my stomach up before I even get there. And this is the only place that's ever had that effect on me. Normally I gotta worry about, getting caught by a pack of crackheads or the police or something, and I don't even have to worry about that, but yet I'm still scared of this place, but I'm not scared of other places where I have to worry about that. One of the things that I find so scary about St. Albans is the building's so difficult to navigate. Most of the other buildings you're going to see on this video are really just long hallways with stairwells. If you have to run out there screaming at the top of your lungs, you know how to do it. But St. Albans, I'm not sure I could find an exit in a panic. I can be a pretty rowdy guy from time to time. I don't scare too easily. So if I tell you I'm scared of that place, you should probably be scared of that place too. See, I even practice not being scared to boost the self-confidence a little bit. Don't ask me why I'm more scared of St. Albans than I am doing stuff like this. That's my dad at St. Albans, and this place scared him too. Because this is the type of place I'd like to take my dad. He doesn't get scared easy either. For example, he was stationed in Ethiopia when the local government got overthrown and all the Americans had 24 hours to get out of the country. And he was also in Syria when they were having a different civil war in the 70s. Remember this bathroom with the name that I'm not allowed to say? Well, Dad was in here doing the ghost hunt, and one of the tour guides has a little chain they have spinning, and you're supposed to be able to speak to the spirits. And that really freaked him out when that chain that was spinning just suddenly stopped spinning. So if he's terrified of this place, I should be terrified of it. And if I'm terrified of it, you probably should be terrified of it too. Another time, I was down here volunteering, giving them a hand building their haunted house, and I had brought my dog with me, and I was just working by myself in the basement. My dog had 3 options. He could sit there and not do anything. There was a door to the outside, so he could just walk outside. Or there was another doorway that led to a long dark hallway in the basement. And that's the way he kept going. Every time I looked down, he'd be gone, and I'd have to go down this hallway and find him. and I have no idea what kept making him want to go down there, but it really freaked me out. If you're into this type of stuff, and in Southwest Virginia, I definitely recommend you look up St. Albans and go on one of their tours.
Besides St. Albans, if you like haunted attractions, we got plenty more around here.
This is Major Graham's Manor in Wythe County, Virginia. In 1786, Joseph Baker owned a cabin where the manor now sits. He had 2 enslaved people with him, called Sam and Bob. Those 2 murdered Baker, and when they were caught, they were hung near his cabin. David Graham bought this land in 1826, and in the 1830s, he built the white frame part of the house. Major Graham was born here in 1836, and he lived in this house his entire life. The family prospered. Besides running a plantation on their 2,000 acres of land, they also had 12 iron furnaces, a mill, and a country store. The brick section of the house was added in 1850. Then, during the Civil War, Major Graham earned his rank of major while he served 3 years. During that time, the house was used as a hospital, a meeting house for Southern officers, and as an orphanage and school run by his sister Betty. Major Graham's mother began to lose her grip on reality, and there's evidence of her domestic incarceration. Basically, she got locked up in the house, so she didn't have to get taken to a hospital. See that big fence around it? That's why I don't have any better pictures. Not all the residents of the house have been in the Graham family. In the 1940s, the house was owned by an eccentric law professor. He ate buzzard eyes and preferred to bathe in the creek. The house has been on countless ghost shows, and amongst the cast of spirits is the professor, who is said to smell, Sam and Bob, who were hung on the land, the mother who was domestically incarcerated, a woman in a veil, and a young girl named Claire, who is believed to be one of the orphans who lived there. 2 counties north of Wythe County, Virginia, is Mercer County, West Virginia, and that's where you'll find Lake Shawnee. The history of this land begins in 1783, when the Clay family settled here. This started a turf war with the local Shawnee. While out hunting, the Shawnee raided the homestead, killing 2 of his children and taking 1 hostage. Mr. Clay tracked the Shawnee to Ohio, but it was too late and his son was burned at the stake before he could save them. The amusement park was built in 1920 as an attraction between large coal towns. 6 deaths occurred while the park was open. A boy disappeared and was later found in the swimming pool drowned. The pool was later filled in. Then a girl was killed when a truck backed up to the swings while they were spinning. The park closed in 1966. In the 1980s, the land was bought to be divided into residential lots. During that time, 13 Shawnee burial plots were found. Lake Shawnee and Major Graham's Manor have 2 things in common. They've both been on multiple ghost hunting shows, and they both have a big fence around it, making it hard to take pictures. A bit farther up into West Virginia is going to be the Western Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The large stone building was built in between 1858 and 1881. Building stopped during the Civil War and resumed after West Virginia became its own state. It closed in 1994 and is the 2nd largest stone-cut building behind the Kremlin in the world. The main building is a Kirkbride design, which is 2 long wards coming off of a central administration area, providing every room with sun and fresh air. It was built to house 250 patients, but ultimately would hold 2,600 by the 1950s. The complex had multiple other buildings on it, including a tuberculosis hospital and a hospital for the criminally insane, which is this brick building. Dr. Freeman was the doctor who invented lobotomies, and he traveled the country showing other doctors how to perform them. He performed 228 lobotomies here in 2 weeks. If you're not sure what a lobotomy is, let me fill you in. They take the pointy thing and then they give it a whack with the hammer inside your nose. But before they use the nose, they use the eye. Here's a training device to show which part of the brain to hit to cure which ailment. Several unsolved murders happened here, including a nurse who disappeared and whose body was found 2 months later at the bottom of an unused stairwell. Another time, there was a fire in the building, so instead of pulling the fire alarm and causing a panic, the nurse pulled the dinner bell, and 390 patients calmly walked into another building. In the days before Social Security, the budget for the hospital was passed by the state, and it did not grow as the population did. Patients wouldn't have any rooms to sleep in, and they'd have to lay on the ground in common areas. And the food supply did not increase. The bad conditions made patients go from bad to worse. 50,000 people are buried here, but they do not represent all the deaths. They are only the people who did not have family to come collect their body. After changes to the mental health system in the 1980s, most of the patients were released. Others who were too unstable to be released weren't though, and when the facility finally closed, the most unruly patients were found locked in cages. The hospital is now privately owned and open for tours, and just like it was before, it is the biggest employer in the town.
Number 1's also a haunted attraction, and that's why I didn't put it on that list. Let me tell you about the night that everything went horribly wrong.
Number 1 on my list is Sweet Springs Sanatorium. William Lewis moved here in 1774. In 1790, he built the first hotel on this land. He did that because there's a carbonated, mineral-rich spring nearby that flows out at 75 degrees year-round and is also carbonated. This bathhouse was built in 1830. The original hotel was made out of stone and totaled 72 rooms. The hotel saw lots of celebrity guests, and in 1839, this was built by John Lewis, Andrew Lewis's son. The hotel remained popular until the end of the Civil War, with many guests being politicians and royalty. But after the Civil War, as rail traffic became more common, no rail tracks were built here and people stopped coming. The hotel was passed from owner to owner, and all their businesses failed. In 1941, it was sold to the state of West Virginia. 2 large wings were added to the back of the hotel, bringing its size to 110,000 square feet. It was used as a nursing home until 1993, and although it's been planned for other projects, they have all failed. In 2015, the hotel was bought by Ashby Berkeley, who has plans on restoring it. Mr. Berkeley was also nice enough to let me come inside and film, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Another way that he's funded the restoration is by renting the property out to ghost hunters, and Sweet Springs has been featured on several TV shows. Now, I can personally attest that there's some pretty weird stuff that happens here. So you seen all them pictures I showed you where it was a nice pretty summer's day? Not anymore. Now this video, this is going to be from a cold, stormy winter afternoon. While I'm off doing this, in the land of no cell phone signal, my girlfriend disappears because once again, I'm a gentleman and this is the type of place I take my girlfriends. See, this is why you can't be scared, because they can sense your fear. There was no problems when she wasn't missing and I was just off doing my thing. But after I realized I couldn't find her and I started getting a little bit nervous, they could smell it on me and I started getting some activity. You know how silence has its own sound? I should have been hearing silence, but instead I was hearing whispers. Everywhere I went, male, female voices, I couldn't hear anything they said, but that's what I heard instead of that silent sound. I ain't gonna lie, at this point, I wanna run away screaming, but I can't because I'm looking for my girlfriend, and it don't matter how spooky anything's happening to me, I can't run out the building and leave her. That's not cool. Alright, this is how you know I'm scared. See, look, I walked through the bathroom, and then I turn around and I walk back out. And what do I do now? I stop and look at the same room I just came in. Why? Because something happened that made me scared. So even though these whispers make me want to just run out of here screaming, and I can't because I can't leave my girlfriend. Whatever's messing with me does not see this the same way that I see it. And they're like, oh, it looks like we got a tough guy. Time to kick it up a notch. Whatever it was that was messing with me began touching me. And as I walked through the building, I could feel things that I could not see brushing against me, or like hands on my shoulder, stuff like that. And it was just absolutely the most freaky experience ever. Now, hearing what's happening to me, you might think some horrible fate befell my missing girlfriend, but to the contrary. No, actually she had just walked outside and she was looking at a couple other buildings even though it was raining, and I just didn't think she'd be outside because it was raining. And she was completely fine.
Alright y'all, that's my video. I hope you liked it. If you did like it, you need to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Don't be watching my stuff for free. If you like this video, here's a couple more you can check out.